And we are live. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Badass College Apps with Admissions Mom, where we talk about applying to college and then we stop and take a breath and think about what's really important in the world sometimes. I'm Admissions Mom, Carolyn Kaplan, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you. And also my special guest, Mark Burkle, also known as ScholarGrade on A2C, and Carly, Queen of A2C, and I'm going to let them tell you a little bit about themselves before we get started. Mark, tell us who you are and what you do.
So my name is Mark Burkle. I run Better College Apps with my wife, and we started it several years ago, I think like 2016 or something. And we help students through the admissions process. Every year, we'll have several dozen students that we'll work with, guiding them kind of through all the ins and outs of college admissions. And obviously it's challenging, it's overwhelming sometimes. We'll talk a little bit about some of the ways that it's even still overwhelming, even though for the most part it's over, because it's never over, right? And one other thing that I really love about this process is all the great people that I get to meet and get to know, and you know, ways to kind of help them through this sort of stressful time of life.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, and thanks again for being here. Third timer now. Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate it. You're a veteran. And Carly, tell us a little bit about you.
I'm Carly. I'm from Portland, Oregon. I'm currently majoring in communications at my community college. I'm the owner of the A2C Discord server, and as Carolyn said, I also moderate the A2C subreddit. So you can find me on either of those if you ever want to talk.
And I'm Carolyn, also known as Admissions Mom, and you can find me on Reddit, on A2C. You can find me on Instagram, occasionally on Twitter. You can also feel free to email me at carolyn@admissionsmom.college. I'm happy to talk to you about college admissions. And before I get too far, I want to also welcome those of you who are watching tomorrow or in the future. I know that this time isn't the perfect time for many of you, especially around the world, to watch, but I love kind of getting your comments from those of you who watch in the future and kind of telling me and seeing that you're watching. So that's great. So if you're here now, yay, so happy to have you with us. If you're here in the future, so happy to have you with us. And oh, thanks, Carly. Carly just shared my email, so that's great. And we're just going to dive right in today, Mark, and start talking about decisions, because it's been a rough week for a lot of kids. You know, it really has. And I was just telling Carly right before you got there that, like, I feel like I'm absorbing a lot of the stress that a lot of the kids are feeling because I'm reading it and trying to respond. And, you know, it's tough. And I know the kids really want to think it's tougher this year than every year, but it's tough every year. And those juniors, if you're watching, it's going to be tough next year. I mean, and sophomores, it's going to be tough in 2 years. You know, it's just a tough time. And we're going to talk a little bit about like how to get through it, how to get through this time, and hopefully maybe some things to kind of help you figure that out. Please don't hesitate, for those of you in the chat, to jump in with questions, to jump in with comments. We love hearing from you. I usually stop our conversation and chat, you know, we'll put your comments up there so we can continue to talk. I did make a little slideshow like I usually do, just to give us some talking points. So I'm going to pull that up and then we'll just kind of start talking from there. So let's see, where is it? My slides. Hopefully that says decisions. Let's see if it does. Yep. Okay. Uh-oh. All right. I'm still getting used to this. All right. So we're going to talk about your decisions and dealing with them, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, and Mark, you and I were kind of just talking about this a little bit at the beginning. So basically, like, you're just going to have a lot of feelings right now, especially if your application decisions didn't go your way. So, you know, the one thing I like to make a point on with the feelings is that, like, feelings are feelings. They're not you. So you are different than your feelings. And if you think of like you as the sky and your feelings is the clouds or the weather. It's going to come and go. I know when you're young, it can be really hard to like just get overwhelmed by the feelings and think that like nothing matters anymore. But feelings do come and go, and it's something you learn from experience for sure. But just having an understanding of like eventually this is going to be better. And Nathaniel, you actually brought that up last week. Like this knowledge that, you know, in the future, you're going to be feeling okay, even though you were feeling pretty bad then. And that was great. And Mark, I wanted to hear what you had to say here about like, just like when you feel like everything is just falling apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the things that I think is really important to remember, like Admissions Mom was just saying, is that like your feelings are important and valid, right? And the disappointment is real. So that's the first thing I want to say is that like when colleges are admitting 3%, 5%, 15%, whatever it is of the students who apply, that the vast majority of people are walking away dejected and sad. And because you've wrapped so much of your life into this, it's a big deal for you, and it's okay to feel down. But where you have to draw the line is where you let that get to you, or let it be a burden that you carry. Because at the end of the day, like it doesn't matter as much as you think it does where you go to college. And that's a weird thing for someone like me to say. Like, I'm an admissions consultant. My job is helping people get into the college they wanted to get into. I would probably have higher sales if I was like, oh no, this is super critical and important, and I'm going to help you get there, right? But like, it's not true. So I'm not going to say that. The simple fact is that you can get a world-class education at hundreds of colleges in the US, and you have every opportunity in front of you. The top students at almost every school are going to go on to do amazing and awesome things. So the biggest exception I'll throw out there is a for-profit school. If you're attending a for-profit school, come talk to me. You have problems and we can fix them. Don't go to for-profit schools. But other than that, probably the school you go to is accredited. Probably it's fantastic. Probably it offers good educational services and other things and good outcomes for the students that are really engaged. So one of the big things I want you to know is that whether you're dealing with, the woes of rejection, or just feeling inadequate, or feeling like everything you've worked for has just come and fallen apart, whatever that is, life is really, really long. And there will be many, many chances to come back from it, right? So the sun comes up tomorrow and it's a new day, it's a new sky, right? Like the sky could be terrible today, but it'll be better tomorrow or next week. And I think it's really important to hold on to that and to recognize, even when it's bad, there will be good days. It's also important to recognize there will be bad days too. Like, this is not the last time you're getting rejected from something. Like, you'll ask that person out on a date and they'll say no, and you'll apply for that job and never hear from the company, right? And like, bad things will happen. This is the fourth business that I tried to start, right? Like college admissions consulting, and it's working out great, but like the first three didn't really, right? And that happens. Like, failure is a part of life. So I think you need to learn to kind of just lean into that and embrace it and recognize that, part of being human is the pain and the emotions, and part of being human is the failure. But that, that doesn't mean that there can't be, clearer skies and better times ahead.
Yeah. And the lessons that you learn, I know it's really hard to hear that, but the lessons that you learn now as a young person about failure and your own resilience are huge, learning that and recognizing it, because I know a lot of our audience are just the super gunners, super driven kids, maybe have never experienced something like this in their lives where it didn't go their way. And that can be feel devastating. But remember, I said feel devastating. It's not devastating. It feels devastating, and your feelings are real, but also like just the knowledge that you're going to learn that like, oh, like this, I can feel really terrible, and I'm going to be okay. Like, you're going to learn that. And that's an amazing lesson to learn. And parents out there, take heart in knowing, if you're watching, and I know there are a lot of you watching tomorrow, probably take heart in knowing that your kid is going to grow stronger from this. I'm a parent. We hate seeing our kids down. We hate seeing our kids upset. But if you can hold on to the fact that they're going to be okay and they're going to be stronger from this, it's going to help you too as a parent. I've been meeting with a lot of parents this week that my parents of my clients are more upset than my students. It's because I've prepped the students. Like really, like I'm talking to the students all the time, like 5% accept rate, okay, great. Make a donation to the college, toss in your application, and then let's go in morning, back in September when you do it, and so they're ready. It's the parents that are like, what happened? I'm like, well, this is what happened. The realities of college.
Math is what happened.
Math. Yeah, exactly. All right. So I'm going to move on and let's see. Now, this is something that I've seen frequently on the subreddit, and I just like to address it. Kids write about how they're just like, they don't feel anything. Like, I don't even know what to feel. Like, I'm just numb. And what I encourage you, if that's you, if you're feeling numb, like, okay, if you're just like, I was super prepped for it, like, I don't really care. I'm excited about my safety or my reality schools or whatever. Like, awesome. That's great. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the kids who like are just kind of like totally numb. They don't feel anything, almost like in a state of shock. I'm going to encourage you to explore those feelings. I'm going to encourage you to dig in and find that anger and sadness, because what I know is that what you resist persists and it's going to stay with you. And I want you to let it out. And Mark, have you come across that with kids you've worked with on Reddit or your private?
Yeah, I've definitely seen this come up before. And honestly, it's not just college admissions. I mean, a ton of different bad things that happen in life can cause this sort of denial or this like, sort of emotional fence that you put up and you just say, oh, I'm going to pretend it's not a problem. And, one of the things that I recommend sometimes for people going through that is like, go for a run or go work out. And like, as you work out, you'll have that mental space where there's not really anything else going on in your head. So you can think about it. Right. But you'll also have sort of that physical outlet. And what sometimes students will happen is like, they'll go for a run to try to process a rejection. Right.
Yeah.
And they'll be running and they'll realize like they've been running super hard and angry and like, and like they've just completely spent themselves on this run because they're bringing all their emotion into it. And sometimes that can be a helpful, almost cathartic feeling, right? Of dealing with it. It's the same, with listening to angry music or punching pillows or even like, talking with other people who are in the same boat, like acknowledging, hey, this is tough. This is hard. Here are all the things that this feels like. And kind of recognizing that's real. I said on the last slide, like, it's okay to feel bad.
Yeah.
You don't need to feel like you can't, or that those feelings.
Allow yourself to. I personally have a hard time feeling anger. It's just, it doesn't come naturally for me. I'm not like an emotional up and down person. I tend to stay very even. And when I do get angry, like I have a hard time letting it out. And that's why I put that, like, I listen to angry music to kind of like tap into it. Like, and actually I've got some kind of shitty stuff going on in my life right now. And so what I've been doing, I don't know if any of you play Oculus, it's like virtual reality. And I play this game called Supernatural, where you like have these bats in virtual reality, these like baseball bats, and you're hitting balloons and bashing them. And so yesterday I did like an hour of heavy metal music, bashing balloons, which leads me to Alex McNeil's comment, let the hate flow through you. Yeah, that's basically what I was doing yesterday in virtual reality, but like using heavy metal music and bashing balloons. So yeah, you got to let that hate in so that it can go out, right? Like move its way out. And then I'm going to quickly just kind of address these. Those of you watching, you can read this later. We always put the slides in the comments, so you can go back and look through the slides anytime you want in the comments of the live stream. So we used to call it in my family, go on a bear hunt. There's this like little book. I don't know if you read it to your kids yet, Mark, but you should.
Oh yeah.
Because
we had a teddy bear themed birthday party like 3 years ago.
Oh yeah. So when you go on a bear hunt, you're like
on a bear hunt,
going through the swishy grass and the oozy goozy mud and like all these things you got to go through to get the bear. And I kind of see those as like I see those as like a metaphor for the emotions, a metaphor for getting through. And let's just say, I want to see what Nathaniel says here. I just started working on more things to give me the best chance in the future. This is my first real rejection ever, and it sucks. And it for sure it does, Nathaniel. So it's good motivation to not have it happen as much as possible. Any thoughts about that, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, like it's very real, and that is how life is. And like, frankly, you're probably going to have other rejections. I mean,
Yeah.
like when I got out of college, I had an awesome job on Wall Street as a stock trader. It was fantastic. I was like, this is amazing. And then like 8 months in, I got laid off because it was, right at the height of the Great Recession, and it was a bad time to take a job with a Wall Street bank. This was 2 days after my honeymoon. I got laid off my job, right? Like that's a pretty tough spot to be in. And at the time, it was a lot harder than it is for me now, looking back on it, because like everything worked out. And I think one of the things that I tell my students this all the time, is that like there's a lot of paths forward in life, and almost none of them are going to end with you destitute living under a bridge somewhere. Like you're probably going to be okay. And even if you have a rough patch where you're unemployed for a while, like I was, where you're aimless for a while, where you don't get what it is that you had set your heart on, or at least not right away, it's going to be okay. And I have tons of examples of this. I have a couple of them I definitely want to share. I'm not sure if now's the right time, but I'll share one with you. And that is one of my best friends who went to a small liberal arts college that's not on anybody's ranking list. And when he graduated, a lot of his friends had gone to more prestigious schools. And, they almost kind of made fun of him for not going to like a better school. Like, really, that's the best you could do? Because he was the valedictorian of his high school. Right. So, and everybody was kind of like, what's wrong with you? And he graduated college and like, he did great in college. It wasn't like incredible, but he did great. He applied to 9 of the top 11 grad schools for PhDs in mechanical engineering, and got into all 9 of them. He went to number 2. Graduated with a PhD 5 years later, and he is now a professor at an Ivy League school.
Wow.
So, like, I don't want you to feel like this is the last chance to be successful in life, right? Like, there will be many other options for you. You don't need to feel like it's a winner take all. As soon as you're admitted, the road ahead will be paved with gold, and everyone will just shower you with like money and candy all day. Like, that's not how life works. You can't win once and then be set for life, nor can you like lose once and like ruin everything, because life is really long. So that's one of the things I want to say about this is like, it's not going to go away, but that's okay, because it wasn't going to go away anyway. Like, you got to.
Yeah. And I think you make a really good point I want to bring up too. And those of you who've spent enough time on A2C, you know this, because every year we get kids back who admissions didn't go their way, and they're like, life is rocking. It's so awesome. This is great. Or, I'm going to look into transferring. But in addition to those kids who, when it didn't go their way, the kids who it did go their way, I don't know if they make big posts on the subreddit, but I hear from them personally. They're miserable. They hate their college. They want to transfer. It didn't solve all their problems to get into Harvard, Stanford, Dartmouth, Penn. And in fact, some of the problems that they had going in are now exacerbated. And I think I just wanted to comment that, because of, like you saying, it doesn't pave the way for gold. It doesn't suddenly make everything okay. It's like, because really it's in you that's going to make everything okay, not a school. A school can't do it.
And, along those same lines, when I was working at the Wall Street Bank, there were people that had worked very, very hard to get there, and that was their dream, right? And they start working there, and then they're kind of like, wait a minute, this isn't maybe quite everything I thought it was going to be. I worked with some people in management consulting for a bit too. And some of those people had the same kind of feelings. Like, I thought this amazing career in management consulting where I would be, highly compensated and have all this amazing opportunity to do cool things that change the world. And then they're like, but really, I just spend 4 days a week traveling to like Ames, Iowa or whatever.
And doing spreadsheets.
Yeah. I'm like buried in a spreadsheet for 80 hours a week. And like, this isn't the life that I want. And so, I always encourage students, like, think about not the specific goal of like, I want to get into Dartmouth, right? Think more about the general goal of like, what do I want my education to be? What do I want out of college? And what do I want after college? Like, why do I want to go to college? What was it that I want after college? What are those goals and what am I going to do with them, right? Because that's a bigger question. It's a harder question, but it's a more important one.
And I'm going to add for our younger students who have not gotten decisions yet, thinking about those questions before you start doing your applications will make your application stronger.
100%.
Doing that hard work before you start doing your applications, you're going to have better applications. It might still not go your way, but your applications are going to be stronger.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. So I think this is an important one to think about as you're thinking about your decisions. And Nathaniel, I'm going to put your quote up here. I'm already prepping for the 1 out of 300 CS interview rate for apps. And I think that's even important in this of like what's in your control and what's out of your control. So, and I spend a lot of time talking to my students about this. Like, you can only control what you can control in your college applications. But as far as the admissions goes, like, there's so much that's out of your control, which makes it particularly stressful, particularly hard to kind of understand and wrap your head around, especially if you're like a top kid in your high school and you're used to always being super successful. Like, the realities of admission can really hit hard. And so what are some of the main things you think, like what you cannot control, Mark?
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, there's a lot of them, right? One thing that I tell my kids this sometimes is that there's things in life that, like, you have this plan and everything looks like it's headed toward this thing. And then something else happens that changes it. Right. And you can't always, you can't like hold that with a tight fist and say like, oh no, like everything's falling apart now. And you know, my kids are young. So for them, this was like, right as the pandemic hit, we had planned a trip to Disney World. And obviously like, it wasn't even like we decided to cancel, like Disney literally closed when we were supposed to be there. And so like, obviously that's a hard conversation to have with like young kids. But I think it was an important lesson for them to learn that like, there's stuff that's out of your control. When you go and apply for jobs and you interview places, like you will interview places and then never hear from them again. I mentioned that. You'll interview places and they'll be like, oh yeah, you're awesome. We love you. But we just decided to give the job to someone else. Sorry. Mm-hmm. But you're totally going to be fine. Don't worry. And you're like, well, thanks. But like, that doesn't help me. Right. And like all through your career, professionally, personally, whatever it is, there will be things that happen to you that you feel like I did everything right and it didn't work. Like, what's wrong with me? And the answer is that like, no, there's nothing wrong with you. That's life. That's how it is. Like, there are things that you can control and things you can't control. So just focus on, here's what I can control. Here's what I can do. Here's how I can work toward whatever these goals are that I've set. And how I can invest to make those things happen. Right.
Exactly. And I think my next slide is this. And I think this is an important part of understanding one of the main things that you have no control over as an applicant, and that's the institutional priorities. And I just put some examples of what they are. And we're starting to see a lot of this now. It was like enrollment. Like, a lot of admissions offices are getting pressure, big time pressure about their enrollment. And so they're like really taking a lot of their class from ED1 and ED2. Mm-hmm. And for those of you who maybe don't have the financial ability to apply early decision, that can be really harmful and hurtful. For those of you who, you know, just like aren't sure, it's really hard. But that's kind of some of the realities for the schools that are offering early decision now. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we saw a lot of it.
Yeah, I'll make one more quick comment on that, just to shed a little more light on how colleges see this, like from their perspective. So one of the problems colleges have here is there's this whole cottage industry of actually consulting firms that help colleges manage yield and enrollment. Right. And so what colleges are dealing with is this problem where it used to be, oh, well, this student has applied to our school. They probably applied to like 3 or 4 other places and probably we're going to be one of the best ones for them. So, you know, here, we'll give them an offer. They'll enroll. It'll be great. It's all predictable. What we've seen as admission rates have gone down and as the number of colleges that the average student applied to went over 10 for the first time last year, yield has also plummeted. And it hasn't really plummeted at places like Harvard and Stanford. It's still like 80% there. But like even places like Johns Hopkins are seeing yield fall. And what this does is it puts them in a little bit of a panic because number one, like they don't know how much is it going to fall again next year. And who are we going to yield? Like it used to be, you know, the higher the yield rate is, the more predictable it is. And I actually got into this conversation with some other, I'm on the Honors College Advisory Board at Clemson University. And I got into this conversation with some of the people there because we were talking about how do we get a higher quality class in our honors college? And the two sort of levers that you have. One is to try to sort of do more marketing to get more people to apply so that the funnel is bigger, right? And then the second is how do you drive yield higher so that those very top people that you do admit to the Honors College end up saying, yes, I want to sign up for the Honors College more at a higher rate, right? Because if they don't, if the yield rate stays the same and you don't increase the funnel size, the only other option is to sort of buy deeper, right? Where you're saying, hey, these are students that we normally wouldn't have given an offer to, but now we have to because we're trying to maintain our levels, our numbers. And so it's this real big problem for colleges trying to figure out how do we, how can we predict who's going to enroll, who isn't? How can we predict, make sure that we have all of our seats filled? And it's a hugely important thing because, at $70,000 or $80,000 a head, you only miss by, 10 or 15 people and you've blown $1 million hole in your budget. So, so it's kind of a big deal.
Or you over enroll and then you don't have anywhere to put the kids.
Yeah, right. Or like seating in classrooms, and all these things are inelastic. You can't just decide, we'll just build a new classroom by next September. Right. You can't do that, right? We'll just throw up a new dorm. Like, no, right. You're gonna have to find a place. Like, how do you do this? It's hard.
Yeah, and that's been an issue. And I think, and so I think we are seeing more and more schools who use early decision. Absolutely. Really use it. And I heard of a college today that I'm not going to call names because I haven't verified my facts. If I can verify it, I'll do it. I'll mention it next time. But I heard of a college today that pretty much took nobody regular decision. They only waitlisted kids regular decision. So their entire class was filled with ED1 and ED2. And so that's probably an exaggerated stat. I don't know if it's true. That's why I'm not saying it. But that was like some of the rumors that I heard. So that's out.
Also though, when the admission percentage is below 5,
basically,
I mean, is there that big of a difference?
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Exactly. Other things that you have no control over, their budget. So, do they need to get more full pay kids that year? Do they need to get more out of state students if it's a public school that year because they've got to control their budget? Location, sometimes a board member will get it in their head, like we need one kid from all, at least one kid from all 50 states or, from these different countries. And you can't control that. You don't know where you live, or you can't control where you live. Certain sports, obviously, legacy is one. I know that's a big hot topic. Academic variety. I think this is something that people really need to think about. All of you CS majors and engineering majors, you have to go broad with your list because colleges, unless they're a tech school, colleges need liberal arts majors. Because you can't really have like a major university without a philosophy department or a classics department or an English department or a history department. So they're going to have their professors. And in order to have professors, they have to be able to pay them. In order to be able to pay them, they need students who take their classes.
Yep.
And
they're all tenured. So you can't just decide, we're going to have 2 fewer professors this year and we'll hire them back next year if we get more English majors in.
Yeah. So you have to face up to the realities. I'm not saying don't be a CS major, engineering major, business major in whatever you want, but just know that it's going to be so much harder for you because everybody else wants to do the same thing you want to do. Clubs and activities, maybe they want to start a club, that you can bring to it, or that, there's just all different and high school relationships. We've been talking about, that, certain high schools do have relationships with colleges. So these are the things you can't control. But you can control what you do, what you put into your application. You can also control how balanced your list is. And not at this point, you can't, but, for those of you who are a little bit younger. And I'm going to be talking a lot about that in the future, not today, though. I rant about dream schools all the time. I'm just going to do this one quickly because I'm going to move on. But I hate the term dream schools. I don't know if you use it, Mark, but if you do, you should stop. I hate that term because I think it kind of implies that you should be able to go there because it's always been your dream that you worked so hard for. And just because it's your dream, it should be able to happen because you've worked so hard. And it doesn't really matter how hard you work. You're probably, if your dream school is a highly, highly rejective college, not going to get into it. Mm-hmm. But you are going to be able to live your dreams because in my mind, the dreams are within you. You can read my slide. I rant about it all the time. Anyway, Mark, do you use the term dream school?
The only real context I'll use it is in the context of early decision, because you are sort of committing. If you admit me, I'm going to enroll. And
Right.
so I sort of say, like, make sure this is your top choice. Make sure, like, it's your dream school. Because if it isn't, and you're just sort of saying, like, oh, well, I'll have higher odds, and I don't care which top school I get into, I just want a top school. Like, sometimes that doesn't go as well as you think. And we certainly have seen it on the A2C sub, right? Like, people coming a year or two later, oh man, I thought getting into Penn would completely, make everything great in life. And all of a sudden, like, life still sucks. It's still hard. There's still bad things that happen. And, like, there's a bit of a disillusionment there. And so I do think don't get too wrapped up on any one college.
Yeah.
And I tell students this, even in the context of some of my most successful students historically. Like I've had students who have gotten into 10 or 12 top 20 colleges, but I have yet to have somebody not get a single rejection, right?
Yeah.
Like I had a student last year who got into Harvard, Yale, Stanford, and Princeton, and he got rejected from Northwestern and Brown. And if he had only applied to Northwestern and Brown, or if those had been his, dream schools, he'd be sitting here with his head to his hands trying to figure out what went wrong, right? And so my message is always, like, let's not think about this in terms of this one school is the dream and I'm going to marry them in my mind, and that's going to be the only thing that's going to make me happy, because that's just not true. And then, as you said, you alluded to this, and I think I'm going to expand on it just a little bit. The dream is not the school, right? The dream is that, like, this school is going to give me these other opportunities and this education and this network and these people that I'll meet and this experience that I really want. It's not just, oh, I'll have this brand associated with me in some, fashion for the rest of my life. It's really about, like, what comes after that, that's why you pay all that tuition and why you spend 4 years doing it, because of what it means for later, not just for the thing itself.
And I would say it's what comes after, for sure. But I think it's also what comes while you're there. And I think a lot of kids, like, imagine themselves in college and imagine what that's going to be like. But, like, what I encourage you to do is to think about that. Like, when you imagine yourself at Brown, I hear Brown a lot as a dream school for some reason. A lot of kids get really attracted to Brown. So when you imagine yourself at Brown, like, take the time to really think about what it is that you're imagining. What are you doing? Are you in class? Are you talking to friends? Are you walking on the gorgeous campus? Like, write all that stuff down and then find the 50 other colleges where you're going to be able to have that experience, because Brown is not the only place where you can have that experience.
Right. And I can tell you what you're not going to be doing. You're not going to be sitting there next to everyone else saying, oh my goodness, guys, can you believe we're at Brown? Hey, we're at Brown. Hey, did you know we're at Brown? Like, the name of the school has almost nothing to do with the experience, right? Like, and I understand that's hard. It's hard to divorce the prestige from the list and the experience, but they're not the same thing. There are people who have a terrible experience at top schools. There are people who have incredible experiences at schools that don't get the respect they deserve. So, like you were saying, I think that it's really important to think about what that experience looks like, right? And then, you'll talk about building a college list. And honestly, you're really good at this. You're helping students find, schools that are maybe not a little off the beaten path, the crowded path, certainly, and finding things that are the attributes they're looking for rather than just the brand names.
Yeah. And juniors will be working a lot on that in the summer. So, and hopefully maybe Mark will come back and talk to us about that. I'm just going to quickly go over this. There's a link here. I'm not going to click on it, but if nothing has worked out for you, if you have literally nothing worked out for you, or you got some acceptances, your applications were accepted at a few places, but you hadn't put that much thought into it. You're like, I don't really want to go there. Or financial aid didn't work out. And that happens to a lot of kids, unfortunately. There are still, like, a ton of amazing colleges accepting applications. If you click on that link, it's going to lead you to my list of, like, schools that I'm familiar with that are still accepting applications. And in that's colleges where either I have visited them, or I have had students attend them, or I've had conversations with the admissions team, and there are a lot there. And then within my document, there's a link to the NACAC list, which is much bigger than my list. So I'm just going to tell you that's there. So if you want to go look at it later. you can. And then I wanted to talk to you about this because I know this is something that's kind of important to you, Mark, too, is that imposter syndrome. And so I'm just going to let you jump in and kind of talk about your feelings about imposter syndrome.
Totally.
It comes up a lot on A2C.
Yeah, man, this is big. For anybody who's uninitiated, imposter syndrome is just this like gnawing feeling in the back of your mind after like you get admitted to something, you achieve something, you attain some kind of status. And it's this feeling of like, I don't deserve this. I don't belong here. I'm an imposter, right? I'm not good enough for whatever this thing is. And there are a few kind of big points that I have about imposter syndrome. The first one is that it happens to everybody. In fact, there are studies that have been done that indicate this happens even to the very best people in their field. Like they're among the best in the world at whatever it is they're doing, and they feel like imposters. People who win the Masters for the first time often feel like, man, I don't deserve to be part of this, distinguished elite group. One of my favorite imposter syndrome stories is actually Weird Al Yankovic. He was at a party. They asked him one time, when did you know like you've actually arrived as a musician? He was at a party in I think in Los Angeles back in the 80s. And he'd gotten invited and he was kind of like, wow, like, I'm not sure I really belong here. Like, am I really, good enough to like widely known enough, famous enough, important enough, whatever? Am I enough to go to this like fancy party? And he was walking around and all of a sudden he heard somebody yell out, "Oh, hey, it's Weird Al. Hey, everybody, we got Weird Al here." And he looked over and it was Paul McCartney.
Oh, wow.
Like that was the moment he realized like, oh, wow, like maybe I'm actually kind of a big deal. Like I've actually made it. I've arrived. And my point from that is not that like, you'll have arrived when Paul McCartney acknowledges you by name in front of the crowd. It's more that you never think that you're enough, right? The very top people in their fields feel this too, and you'll continue to feel it. This friend of mine that I mentioned that's a professor at an Ivy, he felt way over his head, like every stage of his career. I feel this sometimes. It's a natural thing. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're inadequate. It doesn't mean you're insecure. It means you're human. Right. So you need to just lean into it and recognize, like, I am doing better than I think I have any right to be. That must mean that I am more awesome than I think I am, right? And like, allow that to percolate a little bit and realize, like, I have achieved something that is really, truly fantastic. And it's so fantastic that my brain is not wanting me to be able to accept it.
Right.
So that's I think the one of the most important things to recognize is that like this is not unique. You aren't the only person feeling this way. Almost everyone else at your freshman orientation is going to be asking themselves those same questions.
And they're not going to show it on the outside.
Right.
So just because you don't see it in their faces and they seem confident and they seem like they totally belong, that doesn't mean that that's what they're feeling on the inside. And I think one thing that's really important to know is that colleges spend a lot of time, and Mark, you've been on this side, right? Of like reading applications, studying your applications, getting to know you. Mm-hmm. And if they feel like you can handle the work, they'll take you. Colleges don't, they don't want students on their campus who can't handle the work, who don't belong, because that doesn't help them. Mm-hmm. They don't want you to drop out. Yep. They want you to stay there. And so when they're reviewing your application, there was something within you that they want, makes them want you.
Yep. Yeah. And I have two things on that. The first one is these people own this process. Like this is their baby, this admissions process. Like that's their life. They're working, 60, 70 hour weeks during admission season to make this thing happen. And all they're doing is analyzing what is it we really want? Who are the best people for what we want? How do we get them to come here? Let's give this offer to this kid. So if you got that offer, it's because they wanted you. And it's because they wanted you more than all the other people they rejected that they could have had. So whatever it was, right? Even if you have, let's say, not the best SAT score or not the best grades or, I don't know, whatever weaknesses you see, like they didn't care about those. And they're the experts. They're the ones that own this process. So don't let your insecurity tell you that you know more than they do about their own process, right? They picked you for a reason. And then the second thing that I want to say along those lines is that how you feel about this doesn't really impact your ability to succeed. So like Yale estimates on their admissions website that 75% of their applicants are academically qualified to succeed there. Mm-hmm. I'll give you a hint. If you got into Yale, you're in that 75%. They don't admit people who they don't think are going to succeed. right? They're setting you up for success. And so just you feeling insecure is not sufficient for you to feel like, I'm not going to make it. Everything is awful. I don't belong here. I'm inadequate. I'm not enough. Because you are. And then like the slide says, you're going to kill it. It's going to be great.
And it's totally understandable, though, I think for some kids, especially if they come from a family, if they're first gen college student, or if they come from like a non-college going culture, you know, in my high school, which, you know, way back in the 80s, and and it has changed a little bit since then, but out of a class of 450, 8 of us went away to college. And that's like, I mean, when I mean away, I mean like 3 hours away in Texas, like not like off, you know, to the East Coast. Probably a good 20% of the class went to community college, and then the rest of the kids didn't go to college. And, you know, if you come from a place like that, where like you don't really know people, not only are you first gen, but like you really don't even know people who went to college. It is so easy to get to college and go, oh my God, like this is a different like planet, right? Like this is just so weird and different to me. And like, how can I possibly be here? And this is definitely a mistake. So again, like, I want to go back to like, we're telling you that imposter syndrome is like hard and like you can get past it, but the feelings are real. Like the feelings that you have, I mean, we're not diminishing those at all. Just because we're saying like, oh no, they didn't mess up, you deserve to be there, doesn't mean that within your feelings that you're not having those feelings. And so like, again, like acknowledge your feelings, allow yourself to kind of go through those feelings and think about them. So, and let's see. Oh, let's talk about parents. So one thing that comes up a lot also, and it will start coming up more and more in the next couple of weeks on A2C, is my parents and I just like don't agree at all. Like I really want to go to, you know, school A. I feel like it's the best fit for me. It has my major I want, you know, but my parents are insisting on school B because it's, you know, in their minds, it's slightly more prestigious and it has the major they want for me. How do you do this? How do you work through this? And let's assume in this case that finances are not an issue, that like they're the same either way.
Yeah. I mean, I think my advice is always the same as yours. The communication is the key. That's where you're going to both win and lose the argument and win and lose the relationship, right? So the first thing I always tell students is like, the very first thing you need to do is you need to recognize that whatever your parents are doing, whatever they have done, however they have treated this process, probably they love you. Probably they do. And probably they want the best for you. And they probably want you to be happy. And that's, more than likely, that's more important to them than whatever this decision ends up being, whether they say that, whether they can articulate it, whether they know it or not. And so I always recommend start off this process with almost like, I don't know, in dating, it's kind of like a define the relationship kind of thing. I always tell students, like, walk into the room and tell your parents you love them and give them a hug and be like, look, I want a good outcome here. I want something we're both happy with. But like the biggest thing I need you to know is like, I care about you guys. And make sure that they feel that, right? Make sure that they feel it with how you talk and how you have this conversation and how you treat them and like the rest of life around it. You want to make sure that they're understanding like, this is your life, a big part of your life here. And it's a big watershed moment, big decision for you. But that relationship with your parents is important to you. And one of the things that I've been shocked by over the years is students who have had these sort of rocky conversations with their parents, just how disarming it is and how much it helps their parents focus back on, oh yeah, like the point is not the college. The point is you. Like I love you. You're my child, and I want the best for you. So that I think is a really good starting point. The second thing I say is that make sure that you feel like that you're actually listening in this conversation. You're not just sort of saying like, well, here's this point, and have you considered this? And you forgot about that. And you know, make sure, and it says right here, you know, repeat their concerns back to them so they know you're listening and understand. Like, make sure you're actually paying attention and weighing what they have to say. Like, they've been on the earth for 20, 30, 40 more years than you have. They have a lot more experience than you do at some stuff. Maybe not everything. Maybe they're vastly out of touch with, you know, Gen Z culture and college and everything, but they probably know a thing or two about certain things in life, certainly more than you. And so having a healthy respect for that and seeking to learn and understand what that is from them is helpful. And it helps them feel valued. Like you want their opinion to be valued, even if you disagree with it. And then the last thing is the communication, right? That's really important, that you're able to say, this is what I want. This is why I want it. And this is, here's, kind of where I'm coming from. And then listen to all the things that they say about where they're coming from. And I think that sometimes students think of this as like, well, one of us is going to win and one of us is going to lose. And it doesn't have to be that way. Like it doesn't have to be like a zero-sum game. Sometimes people can change their minds. People can be persuaded, either you or them. Sometimes things aren't as a false dichotomy as you think. It's not like, well, either this or this, and anything else is irrelevant. There's often third options and fourth options. And then finally, I would say that you don't have to get this all figured out in one evening. Right. Sometimes students will have these big conflicted, yelling matches that last for hours or whatever. And I always encourage students, take some time to think about it. So talk about your points, listen to their points, come back in a few days and say hey, so I've been thinking about what you said. And, here are some of my thoughts on that. And I really thought this was a valid point, but I still think, that my school is better, whatever it is. But I think that showing them that you're listening, that you care, and that you are invested in the relationship with them is going to help this whole thing go better.
I 100% agree. And I think you said parents are coming from a place of love. And I think that's certainly true.
Most of the
time.
For
the most part, most of the time. I think there are definitely parents who don't know how to show that love. But I think most of the time they're coming from a place of love. And I think also at this juncture, when you're going off and it's the first time that you've probably left them for any extended period of time, maybe you left for a camp or something for a short time or to go visit grandparents or something. But the first time that they're dealing with separation anxiety, probably more than you are. Mm-hmm. And they're definitely coming from a place of fear. No doubt about it. I have lived it. They are fearful for you. They're fearful of your safety. They're fearful about your success in life. And they're fearful about the outcome of their parenting. And that is a fear that most parents don't recognize that they're having, but I promise you they're having it. Yep. Because this is it. This is when it really kind of shows all this work that I did for those 18 years. Did it work? And I think recognizing that as a kid, if you can tap into that and recognize that and tell them, you have done such an amazing job raising me. You have given me whatever they've given you, all the skills, and you know that better than I do because every family is different. But you've given me confidence, you've given me advice, you've shown me love, you've taught me these things. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I am able to think about what I want out of college and be able to tell you, it's because you have done such an amazing job that we're having a disagreement right now, not in spite of it, and I think allowing them to kind of tap into their fears and tap into their, and acknowledge them. And so it becomes just less a battle. Also active listening, which means, and I write about it here, but listen to what they have to say and repeat it so they know you hear them. Believe me, as parents, when you're looking at your phone and we're talking to you, or you're looking at your screen or somebody on Twitch and they're talking to you, we don't assume you've heard us. Even if you did, we assume that you didn't. And that just makes us want to say it again and again and a little bit louder and a little bit louder. And then we become really annoying. And then you don't want to hear us at all. And if you just put your phone down, listen to them. Parents do the same thing, by the way. Put your phone down and listen to your kids. And it definitely helps. And I always kind of recommend do your research. And I say make a presentation because it becomes just one way of doing it. But figure out all the stuff that's kind of worrisome about them, worrisome for them. Usually it's potential career, money, things like that, and address it. Do your research so they know that you're taking this seriously. Nathaniel, it worked out for his parents. His parents wanted him to go to Bama over a top school, and he's going to Bama with a lot of money. I don't know if he got a full ride or not, but I know he got a lot of money. So I'm sure your parents are thrilled for you, and you're going to have an amazing experience there too. And they know that, they know you well. I'm sure they knew that it's going to be an amazing place for you. And yeah, so I'm going to do a whole show about parents one day. Financial issues, I'm just going to point out these slides. If your financial aid didn't work out, I have a bunch of links here for appealing or negotiating your aid. Definitely give it a try. Don't just take financial aid that's not working for you, before you've tried to negotiate it. I don't have any experience with negotiating financial aid or appealing financial aid. I'm just a resource sharer. But Mark, if you have any experience with it, if you'd like to give advice.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the stuff that's probably linked in all the things you have up here. The first one being that financial aid is not a simple formula. If it was, they wouldn't need an office for it, right? It would just be a website. You enter your information and it spits out a number. What it does is, like the financial aid form, the FAFSA calculates how much your expected family contribution is, what the government says this is what we would normally expect a family like yours to pay for college. And then the financial aid office looks at that, and they look at the values in the different fields, and they look at your situation, and they look at their budget, and then they make you an offer. And so it isn't, everybody's going to get the same thing. You could give them the same or very similar numbers from 5 different students, and they could get 5 different offers because it really is about that financial aid officer making a decision. So as such, there is some flexibility here. Every college, or at least most colleges, have at least some funds that they've set aside for purposes of yield management. So we talked about yield and what a big problem it is, right? This is when colleges say, oh man, like we really need to make sure that we don't end up with an empty sociology department next fall.
Right.
And you're one of the only people that's really interested in their school for sociology. They might back up the Brinks truck on you because they really want you. Right. And so you can kind of say like, hey, I really like your school. I would attend if I could. The problem is I can't. Also, right. I got this other offer from this other school that's kind of like you guys, and it's for a lot more. Do you think you could match it? And I have had lots of success over the years with students doing this. I had one of the best cases I ever had. A student got into Washington University in St. Louis with rather large aid award. I don't remember how much it was, but it was $40,000 a year more than what Columbia offered.
Whoa.
Which is crazy because Columbia says they meet full demonstrated need, right? And something about the way those 2 financial aid offices were looking at it was just widely different, right? And I think maybe the right answer was somewhere in the middle, but at any rate, student really wanted Columbia. And so we wrote a letter of appeal, as you've noted here. That Meritmore link has some extra resources on how to write that appeal letter. The college essay guy certainly has a lot of wisdom to share too. And really, all it is saying like, hey, here's the reasons why my situation is what it is. Here's some things about my situation that you need to make sure you're accounting for. Maybe things that might not have shown up in the financial aid forms, right? Whether it's increase in liabilities or spending or costs in life, decreases in assets or income or whatever, just anything about your family situation that could cause you to need more aid. And then, here's some things about maybe some of these other offers that I got, or some of the, other sort of reasons why I think like more aid would be reasonable and appropriate. Mm-hmm. And then usually I tell students to finish with like, and I really do want to come to your school. Like, I'm not just fishing for a bigger number so that I can like brag about it. This is my life and I want to spend it with you, right? And so I often tell students like, make sure that you sell them on like, I am in love with you kind of thing at the end. And this student did that, and Columbia matched her offer and raised their aid offer by $40,000.
So, okay. So you do bring up the other offers. I never know how to answer that question when the kids ask.
Yes. And I will have, I would probably say, don't bring up other offers that are essentially irrelevant, right? My local community college gives full tuition scholarships to the top 10 students from my high school's graduating class. So I have that offer on the table. I'd like you guys to match that full tuition offer from the community college. That's kind of a different thing, right? Like, right. Columbia, WashU, they're not going to see that as a peer institution. So right. You can kind of think peer institution is a little bit of a hard thing to quantify. You can kind of think geography. You can kind of think like selectivity. Those are sort of 2 kind of metrics. Also like public versus private. So like UNC and UVA would be considered peers, right? They're both in the ACC. They're relatively close geographically. They have a lot of the same kind of admission standards and stuff. Probably they would be willing to compare offers from each other, although state schools have, obviously different situations with financial aid wanting to appeal to in-state students. But if you were, let's say, from Tennessee or something and applying to both of those, you could probably show them the other offer, and they would at least consider that as valid. Similarly, schools like, Vanderbilt, Emory, Washington University, St. Louis, Rice, those are all going to be kind of in the same bucket, right? And there are buckets like this all over the map as far as colleges go. I mean, it could be something like, Cedarville and Hillsdale and Grove City College, right? And those are all sort of like Christian schools that are, kind of in the same, they consider each other peers. And so whatever that peer group is, if you have another offer from the peer, bring it up, because if it's a solid offer that you're excited about, because that's one of the ways that the admissions office might look at it, or the financial aid office, would look at it and say, oh man, like this other school has made you this offer, and they feel like you're, that's an appropriate number. And again, it can vary too, depending on merit aid versus need-based aid. Usually colleges aren't especially excited about negotiating merit-based aid, because that's more of a determination, right? We've looked at your academics. We've determined that you're, deserving of this award. So if another school thought more highly of you, well, good for them, right? That's kind of their view. But if they say, hey, we're going to meet your full need, and there's another school saying, yeah, we're going to meet your full need, and those numbers are vastly different, usually somebody's wrong, right? And so if you can show them, hey, we think it's you, sometimes they do reconsider.
Yeah, that was all great advice. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. And we're going to do this one next week. So next week, stay tuned. We're going to be talking about how to make your decision. So for those of you who haven't finalized yet, you're on those help me decide threads and got schools floating around in your head, and maybe you and your parents are still disagreeing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that next week, and we'll talk about ways to kind of like get through and make your decisions happen. So I'm going to take this down, because next week is when we're going to be doing that. And so I'm going to remove it. And here we are. So Mark, thank you so very much for being with us today and talking about just dealing with decisions, because I think it's probably the biggest part of college admissions. And I hope there's going to be some juniors and parents out watching this to be ready to kind of prepare themselves for next year. But for those of you seniors in the thick of it, know that we're here for you. And we're thinking about you, and know that you're totally, even though it doesn't feel like it right now, you're going to be okay. You have any final thoughts, Mark? Because I'm going to do my 1-minute meditation, but I know you probably want to jump off to be with your kids, unless you want to stay today.
Yeah, no, I got to help get them to bed.
Yeah, I figured that.
Yeah, my only closing thought here is that I mentioned having many other examples of people who have been very successful in life that did not follow this linear path. Life is not always linear, but it is really long.
It's zigzags.
You're not necessarily going to be well, and then I made more money, and then I did this thing that was really awesome, and then I achieved this milestone, and everything just kept getting better and better, and then I died. That's not how life goes. It moves all over the place on you. And, one example is a friend of mine that recently retired. Obviously he's older, but he barely made a 3.0 GPA in high school and college, right? And kind of with some help from some friends was he able to do that. The first 3 jobs he had out of college, he either got fired or laid off.
Wow.
So, I think about 7 or 8 years after college, things were not looking good for him, right? He can't hold down a job. And many of these jobs were not glamorous. I mean, one of them was driving a truck. So it's not like a delivery truck. It's not like this is, really hard things. And he was like, man, what did I do wrong? What's wrong with me? He ultimately ended up starting his own business. It really took off. He was able to structure the business around his strengths and hire people to fill in for some of the things he was weak at. When he retired, he had a beach house and a lake house and a regular house, and totally doing great for himself. Right. So I don't care what your level, your measures of success are in life, that's doing pretty good. And that's not really the landing point you would expect for someone who, didn't get great grades and, got laid off or fired from their first 3 jobs. And so my point is that, like, life is really long. It has lots of twists and turns. There's lots of different places that it can go. And if you look up successful people, some of them are like Mark Zuckerberg. They invented something at age 18 and like the rest of their life was awesome. And some of them are like Stephanie Meyer, who wrote the Twilight series at age 30. Like, that's when she started writing it. And before that, she was nobody, right? And there are many examples of this. The guy who founded McDonald's started it in his 50s. Like, this is not something where life is not a one-shot deal. You don't make one, have one heroic, amazing thing happen and then everything is great, nor do you have one tiny mistake or failure and everything is miserable. So don't let yourself fall into this rut of thinking that, like, because I didn't get into, this top rejective school, I'm a reject and that's going to be, following me for the rest of my life. And the last thing I'll say about this before we close out is that there is actual academic research that backs this up. So there was a paper published, I believe in 1998, a 10-year longitudinal study about does it matter what school you went to? And what the two, Stacy and Dale, these 2 economists, you can Google it, Stacy Dale, just type Stacy and Dale into Google, it'll come up. It's a really famous paper. But it basically said that it doesn't actually matter where you go to school. What matters more is where you apply. Like, students who applied to top colleges and got rejected were just as successful as the students who got admitted, which tells you that, like, it's being an amazing student who is highly motivated, who is engaged, who is bright, who has a lot of strengths to bring to the table. That's what makes you successful, not the brand of this college applied to your resume, right? And so, and that's, again, peer-reviewed scientific journal. It's not like just some people postulating this. So I really want you guys to walk away with this message that whether you got admitted to a top school and you feel like you don't deserve it or you don't belong there, or whether you didn't get into the schools you wanted and you're feeling like a failure, life is really long. It is not linear, and you can still achieve your dreams and you can still be successful. You just have to, figure out what that looks like for you and lay out some steps for how you're going to get there.
Yeah, that was so perfectly said. And thank you very much for, like, sharing those stories and your own personal story. I will tell you all that I did not have a 3.0 when I graduated from college. I was a good high school student, but remember I said only about 20 of us went to college. So that gives you the context of my high school. I did not graduate from college with a 3.0. Have had a very zigzaggy life, some, really down parts of my life that all led me to right here. And this is where I want to be. And, led me to A2C, led me to meeting Mark and Carly and all of you out there. And who knows where it's going to go. And I want to make a comment about Mark Zuckerberg. You said he's going to have, like, an amazing rest of his life. We don't know that.
Well, yeah, right.
He's a baby.
And honestly, he's already, dealt with a whole lot more problems than
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't trade places with him. I'll be honest.
He's a baby. Yeah. So we don't know where his life is going. He's going to zig and zag in his own way. Anyway, thank you so much. I know I will have you back because I will rein you in and make you come. And really appreciate it again. And have a good evening. And
all right.
You want to jump on and we'll do, like, a little minute?
All right.
Bye, Mark. See you later.
Bye.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
What do you remember the name? Did you say Stacy and Crane? I was going to write that down and then I forgot.
Stacy, I think it was, I don't know, Stacy and something, yeah.
Get him to post that on the subreddit because I think that would be really cool. Okay, so we're going to do one little quick minute. I think today we're just going to kind of, like, find some stillness. I'm going to get my bolo because I have it here. And so this is my bowl. And so for those of you still with us, or for those of you watching tomorrow, yep, it's our A2C owner. She is here. Let me just, like, pop this up. Oh, good. Yeah. A2C owner, that is Carly. And Ezrath is going to be here with his guided meditation. I don't know what POG means. Carly, can you fill me in?
It's kind of like yay in a sense. Like, it's good. It's a good thing.
Okay. And is it POG or POG?
It's POG.
Okay. Yeah, my kids used to play with POGs. There used to be, like, a game, like these little bottle caps that they would toss. But my kids are older. Okay, interesting. All right, great. So we're going to do just one little minute. So those of you here with us now and those of you watching in the future, join in. It's good to sit still for a minute. And what I want you to do is just close your eyes if you're comfortable with that. If you're not comfortable with closing your eyes, you don't have to. Put your hands in really honestly whatever position feels good for you. For this meditation, I do want you to sit up if you can. So if you're lying on your bed, just kind of like sit up, because I'm going to be talking about like finding this kind of, I'm going to get a little woo-woo on you, sorry. But I just want you to kind of like think about the power in the top of your head. And I want you to think about creating a straight line from the very top of your head down through your neck, kind of into your lungs and your heart, down through your belly, and kind of all the way to the chair. So just like one line there. And I want you to just kind of like feel that line. Like if you could imagine like a light beam going down from the top of your head all the way to your chair. Just imagine that. And while you're thinking about it, I just want you to do some breathing. And like Ben told us a few weeks ago, if you make your exhales a little bit longer, it can relax you a little bit more. So do some inhales and maybe count to 3. And then on your exhales, maybe count to 5. I want you to do 3 more deep breaths. I want you to reacquaint yourself with that beam of light coming in through the top of your head down to the chair. Just kind of picture that again. And imagine your whole body now filling up with that light. Like send that light out to all the parts of your body, to the tips of your fingers, to your toes. Take 2 more breaths. And when you hear my bell, and when you can't hear it anymore, then you can gently open your eyes. Great. Let's do a little stretch. Maybe like shake around a little bit, wake yourself up. And yeah, thanks so much for being here with us. Talking about your decisions today. And for those of you watching in the future, thanks so much for being with us. And thanks for coming to Badass College Apps with Admissions Mom, where we talk about college, applying to college, and
we stop and take a breath.
Stop and take a breath. That's important to do. Remember to do that all day long. Thank you all. See you later. We'll be here next week talking about how to make that decision. Bye-bye.